Mr. Lawler, is Ms. Jackson returning?
They're doing some stuff on my own.
Okay, all right.
We're ready to go.
Just before we proceed, at the lunch hour, I just happened to be getting takeout from the same place that Mr. Carter and his friend, who's not here, were. We had no conversation with one another, correct, Mr. Carter?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on my way over, I did pass by one of the jurors. I had no conversations with him. I believe he came from the same location that Mr. Carter and I were getting some lunch, and I assume Mr. Carter had no communication with him. Okay, thank you. Okay, jury's ready? We don't have them all back yet? Okay.
I just take up one issue. I believe the officer is going to testify.
Yes.
In his statement to IA and other statements, he described the incident with suspect Mr. Carter as he was manhandling her. And you only learn that from multiple years. That he learned from Officer Cruz, who was supposed to learn from daily. So that's one thing I would just request that you now mention that, especially for that term. I mean, now he has no knowledge at all of what happened to that before he came to the acting part-time.
Okay, so your objection to him testifying about what allegedly occurred between Mr. Carter and Mrs. Spejo is hearsay because he didn't observe any of that. Okay, what says the state as to the hearsay objection?
It has no intention of eliciting a hearsay on that issue.
Okay, that will not be an issue then.
And then we had prior motions eliminated with Officer Mays concerning any reasons why he did often work, such as making extra income to pay for his college, his children's education, or anything of that capacity to try and incur favor.
Right, and I think I already ruled on that.
Right, I just want to make sure he's been informed that sometimes.
Okay. Mr. Williams? Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Barry, how many jurors are we missing?
I know there are at least two, but
Mr. Williams, do you anticipate that the direct examination of the next witness will take as long as Ms. Fallon's direct examination of Officer Cruz?
I do not.
Mr. Lawler, do you anticipate that the cross-examination of the next witness will take as long as the cross-examination of Officer Cruz?
Okay.
Okay. And then the witness who's going to be testifying after that, is that Mr. Gillespie? Okay, I guess I'm just trying to determine whether we can finish with both of those witnesses today. What does the state think about that?
Optimistic.
Okay. Mr. Lawler?
Same here. The thing is, most times looking at the video, so
Okay.
I'm not sure what videos I'm going to show.
Okay.
I don't think with the last games with many Officer Mays.
Okay.
That change takes some time.
Okay. Then I think I may tell the jury that we're going to hear from two witnesses today, and then we're going to take our evening recess, and that we may end up working past 5 o'clock, so I'll need to make sure that they don't have any commitments that would preclude them from being here after 5 if necessary. Okay, that's fine. Well, when you're ready, you can restart. Thank you. Right, you may be seated, everyone. State, you may call your next witness.
The state calls Charles Mays.
Call me.
Raise your right hand, please. Could you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Do?
Good afternoon, sir. You may be seated. Move that microphone down. Thank you. Would you tell us your name, please?
Charles Mays,
Mr. Mays, would you please spell your last name for the court reporter?
M-A-Y-S.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mays, where are you currently employed?
Department of Financial Services, State of Florida.
And what do you do for the Department of Financial Services?
I'm an insurance analyst
How long you worked there?
since May 2nd of 2016.
So within the last few months?
Yes,
Were you employed prior to going to the Department of Financial Services?
yes.
Where were you employed before Department of Financial Services?
The Orlando Police Department.
And how long were you a member of the Orlando Police Department?
23 years and 9 months.
You know the days or just months?
Yes, 23 years and 9 months.
Okay. So when did you start with the Orlando Police Department?
July 5th of 1992.
Can you tell us the reason you left the Orlando Police Department?
Counsel approach.
Let me ask a more specific question, Mr. Mays. Were you terminated from the Orlando Police Department?
Yes.
Were you terminated from the Orlando Police Department when you left in 2016?
Oh, no.
Okay. Was that separation voluntary?
Yes, it was. I started another career.
You retired?
I retired.
Okay. Were you employed in the Orlando Police Department back on June 4th of 2015?
Yes.
Now, what were your duties back on June 4th of 2015?
I was working an extra duty detail at 578 North Orange Avenue.
Now, that was an extra duty detail. What was your assignment as a law enforcement officer back then?
Security.
Well, not that night, but your regular duties as an OPD officer.
On my regular duties, I was a patrol officer in the North Division.
Okay. Where's the North Division?
Well, the North Division covers Old Cheney Highway on the east side all the way to John Young on the west side on the north side of State Road 50.
And had you worked a shift on the day prior to the night of the 4th?
Yes.
Did you go home or go straight to venue from your shift?
I went home.
Right. When you went to work your shift at venue 578, were you wearing a police uniform?
Yes, I was.
Can you describe it?
It's a summer uniform we're allowed to wear from Memorial Day to Labor Day. It's blue shorts, blue shirt, has the Orlando Police Department emblem on it, has Orlando Police on the back. I have my duty belt with all of its equipment on it.
Do you remember what time you arrived at venue 578 to work your off-duty detail?
I can't remember the time. I know that it was an earlier shift than I usually worked because of the function itself.
All right, was it still light out?
When I arrived,
You arrived.
I can't remember.
Okay. Where did you go when you first arrived?
I went to the back parking lot. That's where I usually am when I work that shift.
And how did you get to venue 578 to work this off-duty shift?
I drove in my assigned police car. It's a police car with the Orlando Police on it. It's white, blue, and yellow, has sirens, lights on it.
And did you stay parked in the back parking lot at the beginning of your shift?
Yes, I did.
Had you ever previously worked at venue 578?
Yes, I have.
How many times had you worked there before that night?
Several times.
And is that location venue 578 in Orange County, Florida?
It is.
Were there any other officers working that detail that evening?
Myself and Officer David Cruz.
Had you ever worked with Officer Cruz before?
Yes, sir.
How many times, if you know?
Several times.
Had you worked with him at venue 578 before?
Several times, yes.
Had you ever worked with him as an OPD officer other than at venue 578? Like, had you ever done patrol with him?
Patrol, I don't think so because we're assigned to do two different sectors in the city. Off-duty jobs, I can't remember. I just know that we worked together quite a few times at venue 578.
Prior to the night of June 4th, 2015, did you have any social relationship with Officer David Cruz outside of your employment?
No, I haven't.
Ever hang out with him socially in something that wasn't related to your duties as an officer?
No.
Were you familiar with the security staff at venue 578 from your previous off-duty details?
Yes, I knew several of them.
Did you have any social relationship with any of those individuals
You mean outside of?
outside of venue 578?
No.
Now, did there come a time on the night of June 4th, 2015, when you received a call for backup?
Yes, I did.
What device did that call come over?
On our issue department police radios.
Had you checked in that night to receive an officer number notifying OPD that you were working off duty?
Yes, I did. That's part of the policy.
Right. You have permission to publish United States Exhibit 4? Thomas Mays, there's a laser pointer in front of you, a black remote looking object. So, do you recognize the image of the map depicted in State's Exhibit 4?
I do.
And do you see venue 578 on that map?
I do.
Can you show us where venue 578 is?
Right here.
All right, and can you show us the parking lot where you were sitting when you got the call for backup?
Back here. It's right here at the top.
Now, were patrons of venue 578 using that parking lot to park on the night of June 4th?
Yes.
And were you essentially monitoring that parking lot in the rear part of venue 578?
Yes.
Right? Do you remember approximately what time it was that you got the call to come as backup?
I'm going to say somewhere around 9 o'clock, maybe a little bit after 9 o'clock.
Right? Did you recognize the voice asking for the call?
Yes, I did.
Who was it?
It was Officer Cruz.
Right? Once you received the call, what did you do?
Well, there was a lot of radio traffic, so you have to kind of wait until it clears, or what we would call stepping on someone means that you will interrupt their transmission. And I waited for a transmission, and I told him that I was out at the same venue and that I would be en route to back him.
How did you make your way to where he was?
I walked.
Right, can you show us on the map the path of travel you took?
I came out of the side. I'm sorry. I came out of the parking lot here, and I took the south side walk along Concord, and I walked up to the side right about here.
So walking from top to bottom in the photograph along Concord Street.
Yes.
You're still wearing your police uniform at that time, is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. Carter, I should have asked you, how old were you back on June 4th of 2015?
51.
All right. Did you walk or run to that call?
I walked.
When did you first see Officer Cruz? And if maybe a better question is, can you show us on the map where you were when you first saw Officer Cruz?
It's about right along here. I saw Officer Cruz standing on the side of the club. There's an entrance here where personnel, security, and what have you are here, and he was standing somewhere in this area here. It may be a little farther down, but somewhere right in here.
Somewhere along the Concord side of the club.
Yes.
Was anybody standing with Officer Cruz when you saw him?
Yes.
Can you describe the person or persons that you saw standing with him?
It was a black male and a Hispanic female.
Can you describe the female? Any more than Hispanic female?
Short, long black hair, and I think she was wearing glasses. She had on a pair of jeans and a blouse.
And what about a physical description of the black male?
It was a black male, not as tall as I am, bald.
What about his physique? Thin, stocky?
I would say medium in good shape.
All right. So when you first saw Officer Cruz and those other two individuals, what did you observe?
I observed Officer Cruz standing next to the female, and she was crying, and she was looking down at her phone, and I approached them from there.
Right. Without saying if anything was said, did you converse with Officer Cruz when you got up to him?
I did.
Right. Is that the first thing you did?
Yes, that was the first thing I did.
How close did you get to Officer Cruz before the two of you started to speak?
Like from here to here.
Very close.
Very close.
Where in proximity to yourself and Officer Cruz was the Hispanic female at that time?
Standing off to the side, maybe from me to the partition right here.
What about the black male?
Maybe from me to the edge of the partition. There may be a little closer.
Okay, so you're pointing in different directions. Had they been separated at that point?
They were separated.
All right. Did you see them get separated, or were they separated when you first saw them?
They were separated when I first saw them.
Okay. And you approached nearer to the female, is that right?
Yes.
And you had a brief conversation with Officer Cruz, is that correct?
I did.
Did he ask you to, what did you do after that conversation? Where did you go?
I stood while Officer Cruz went back to talk to the young lady, and I was watching the male as he was standing facing the gate.
Now, the black male that you saw standing and that you were watching, do you see him in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please point to him and describe an article of his clothing?
The gentleman here with the dark suit and the light blue tie, bald head, glasses.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
Record will so reflect.
As you were watching the defendant, what was he doing while Officer Cruz was talking to the female?
Just staring, facing the fence, staring at it.
Who was he staring at?
He was just staring at the fence.
Okay. Could you hear any conversation, without saying what you might have heard, could you hear any conversation between Officer Cruz and the female?
No, I couldn't.
As you got closer to her, were you able to tell anything more about her, the demeanor, than you've already described?
No.
All right. So what happened next?
Officer Cruz approached me and engaged me in conversation.
All right. Without saying what was said, did he apprise you of his conversation with the female?
He did.
All right. Based upon that, what did you do?
I was just there as a backup for Officer Cruz. Officer Cruz told me his intentions, and that's what we did.
All right? So what did you see Officer Cruz do at that point?
We started walking towards the black male, and he started walking towards us, and Officer Cruz engaged him in conversation.
Now, what was the Hispanic female doing while the two of you were engaging the defendant?
She was still using her phone.
At any point, well, did yourself and Officer Cruz remain in between the black male and the Hispanic female while you engaged him in conversation?
We did.
Did you hear Officer Cruz say anything to the defendant?
I did.
What did you hear him say?
He told him that the female had found a way home and that she wasn't going to be leaving with him.
All right? And what was the defendant's response to that?
He told us he didn't care. He wanted to talk to her.
All right? Did Officer Cruz make any statements to him in response to him wanting to talk to the female?
Officer Cruz told him that that wasn't a good idea and that he needed to leave.
Okay. Did the defendant react to that statement?
He did.
What did you see him do after Officer Cruz made that statement?
Officer Cruz was to my right, and we were shoulder to shoulder, and he tried to go in between us towards the female.
Did you have any physical contact with Noel Carter at that point?
No, other than the bumping and him trying to go in between us.
Okay, but he did physically bump you at that point?
Yeah, he bumped both of us in his attempt to go in between us.
Okay. I'm assuming you didn't give him permission to do that, right?
No.
Okay. Did you make sure he didn't get past the two of you?
I didn't. Officer Cruz pushed him back with his left hand.
Right. What happened next?
Mr. Carter stumbled back, and he regained his composure, and then he tried to go around us to talk to the female.
Now, the map is still up. Can you show us there, can you show us on the map where you were when this is starting to happen, where the engagement with the defendant was occurring?
It's right about here.
So let me show you a couple of photographs. Got permission to publish the photos in case of it. Officer Carter. Excuse me, Officer Mays. Actually, it's Mr. Mays at this point.
Thank you.
Space Exhibit 2, M2. Recognize that image?
I do.
Can you use a laser pointer to show us where you were when you were having this engagement, the initial verbal engagement with the defendant?
Right about here.
Okay, and where was Mrs. Spejo?
She was a little farther back, like right along here.
So she would have been to the right of the photograph. That's on west down Concord.
Yes.
All right. So you said that Noel Carter tried to go around the two of you to reach the female. Is that right?
Yes, he did.
Which route did he take, if you could show us?
Right here.
So he went out onto Concord Street?
Yes, he was along the sidewalk and Concord right along here.
Did either yourself or Officer Cruz take any physical or make any physical movements to prevent him from getting to the female?
I moved to the left as he moved to the left.
Now, you said you moved. Did you touch him in any way at that point?
No,
Right. And did you see Officer Cruz touch him in any way at that point?
not at that point, no.
Were there any verbal commands being given to Mr. Carter at that point?
Officer Cruz approached him, and he grabbed his left hand and asked him to place his hands behind his back. He was under arrest.
And how did the defendant respond to that statement?
He didn't say anything. He just tensed and started pulling his arms away from Officer Cruz.
Did the tensing and pulling prevent Officer Cruz from handcuffing Mr. Carter?
It did.
So then what happened after this failed attempt at handcuffing?
Officer Cruz reapproached him and tried to handcuff him again. He told him to turn around and put his hands behind his back, and he just pulled away.
Were you able to see or determine what Mr. Carter's focus was at that point.
I guess he was trying to talk to the young lady.
So how did the defendant defeat the second attempt by Officer Cruz to put him in handcuffs?
He tensed his arms and then he just yanked away.
All right. Did Officer Cruz actually get his handcuffs out?
He had his handcuffs out.
All right. What did you see after the second attempt?
Officer Cruz grabbed him around the midsection from behind, and I retrieved my spray at that time, my
Okay.
chemical agent.
All right. Now, Officer Cruz displayed a duty belt. Are you familiar with that duty belt with the Orlando Police Department?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with the one that he was wearing on that night?
Yes.
Were you wearing one that was the same or similar?
Yes.
Was it the exact same or just similar?
I would say similar.
Okay. And on that belt was, one of the items on that belt was your chemical spray.
Yes.
All right. When you pulled out your spray, did Officer Cruz have the defendant under control?
No, he did not.
Right? What actions, if any, was Noel Carter taking when Officer Cruz was trying to wrap him up?
He was walking away, pulling Officer Cruz along with him.
What was Mr. Carter's relative size compared to Officer Cruz?
I mean, he's taller, more muscular.
All right? So when you saw Mr. Carter sort of pulling Officer Cruz, what did you do?
I retrieved my spray from my pouch, and I told Officer Cruz I was going to spray him. I just yelled to him, spray.
And did you in fact use your chemical agent at that point?
I did.
How far away from Mr. Carter were you at that point?
Maybe from here to here?
So within arm's reach?
Yes.
Do you know if any of the spray got on his person?
Yes, it got him on the side of the face.
Were you able to see his reaction to that?
Yes.
What reaction did he have?
He didn't have a reaction. He kind of ducked and moved away
Now, have you ever been sprayed with chemical spray?
several times.
In the face?
Yes.
Were you able to have a non-reaction?
Oh, no, I had a reaction to it.
What was your reaction to it?
It burns.
Okay. Are you able to wipe that spray off?
No, that only makes it worse when you try and wipe it off.
How do you use the word decontaminate once you've been sprayed with that particular chemical spray?
It's usually done by water, pouring water on your face, and just over a period of time, you kind of have to let it evaporate. Sometimes it can take several days for the spray to wear off.
Were you, those sprays that you were talking about, was that a training exercise where you were sprayed?
They were training.
Now, so you said Mr. Carter didn't have a reaction, and what did he do after you sprayed him?
He continued to move around.
Move around where, if you can show us, and describe the movement you saw.
He moved here, and then he moved here.
So at first it looks like you're pointing that he moved to the east, down the sidewalk,
This way, and then he moved this way.
and then back west.
Yes.
Okay. Was he saying anything as he was moving?
No, not that I remember.
Did he cry out for help?
No.
Did he say stop or anything of that nature?
No.
Were either you or Officer Cruz giving any verbal commands at this point?
Yes, we were telling him to get on the ground and put his hands behind his back.
Now, when you say telling him, were you telling him or were you screaming?
We were yelling at him.
All right. And did he ever, at that point, go down to the ground?
No.
In any way, any part of his body?
No.
Did he ever put his hands behind his back?
No, he did not.
So you said first he moved to the east and then back to the west. Where did he go after he moved back to the west?
He kind of retreated kind of back into this corner over here. And when I say retreated, just moved back. He backed into the corner there.
Do you know where the Hispanic female was at that point?
Yes, as he moved this way, she moved this way and was behind myself and Officer Cruz.
Was that a conscious decision to try to keep them separate, or did it just work out that way based on the movement?
It was a conscious decision.
So what did Mr. Carter do, or what did you observe him do when he got backed into the corner?
Officer Cruz was giving him verbal commands to get on the ground, put your hands behind your back. He didn't listen. He just stood there watching us, and then Officer Cruz ran into him and hit him in the waist, in the thigh area, and they both went down to the ground.
And when you say hit him with what? What part of Officer Cruz hit the
He
defendant?
ran into him with his right shoulder and hit him in the midsection there, the pelvic girdle, and they both went down to the ground.
Now, is this like on the sidewalk, in the sidewalk area?
Yeah, it's in the sidewalk area back in this corner here.
Did Mr. Carter, the defendant, stay on the ground?
No, he immediately, when they went down, he pushed off, and then he jumped right up.
Right? Did Officer Cruz get up?
Officer Cruz was like down on one knee, and he started to get up.
Who got up first?
Mr. Carter did.
Which direction, or what did Mr. Carter do after the attempted tackle?
He started moving this way towards me. I was like about right here, and he started moving towards me.
So at this point, the defendant is between yourself and Officer Cruz, is that right?
Yes.
Right? And as he moved towards you, what were you thinking?
That he was going to try and get away.
All right? So what did you do at that point?
I took my expandable baton out, we called it an asp, and I extended it.
And was this before he got to you?
Yes.
And was he looking at you when you did this?
He was coming towards me, yes.
Okay? Did he continue to come towards you or change direction once you did that?
He continued to come towards me.
Right? Did he ever make physical contact with you at that point?
No.
Right? So what did he do? How did he avoid that?
Well, as he was coming towards me, Officer Cruz deployed his taser.
Right? Now, did you see him loading the taser and preparing to discharge it?
I can't say that I saw him. I was just watching Mr. Carter as
Alright.
he was moving towards me.
So how did you become aware that the taser had been deployed?
I heard it when it was deployed.
And I'm assuming in the course of your 23 years at OPD, you had heard a taser deploy in the past. Is that right?
Yes, we were actually, before we were issued the tasers, we all got tased. So I'm very familiar with it.
And there was no mistaking what the sound was. Is that fair?
No mistake.
Did you see the defendant, Mr. Carter, have any physical reaction to the discharge of the taser?
Yeah, he flinched a little bit, and he started to speed up his steps.
All right. And is he still headed east on Concord?
He's still headed towards me, yes, east.
Did you hear the sound of the taser before or after he reached you? The defendant, before or after the defendant reached you?
I heard it before he reached me.
All right. So you hear the taser. Do you know if the prongs struck Mr. Carter?
I couldn't tell you if they struck him or not.
All right. So what did the defendant do after you heard the taser? What did you observe? What did you see?
He kept coming towards me, and he had his hands like this.
Right? Were there any commands being given to him at that point?
Yes, sir. Get on the ground.
Was that you or Officer Cruz?
Both of us.
And did he comply with that command at that time?
No, he did not.
So with his hands like this, which way did he go?
East towards me.
Describe what happened as he moved east towards you. Now you've got your baton out.
As he came closer to me, when he got within distance for me to strike him, I struck him with my asp.
Where did you strike him?
I struck him on his left thigh, on the outer part of his left thigh, and here on his left side of his left arm here.
Did you choose those areas on purpose?
Yes.
Why?
When training, those are the areas that they tell us to strike, that we would probably get more compliance without causing any serious injury.
So was your goal to cause him serious injury?
No,
What was your goal in striking him?
to get him to comply and lie down on the ground so that he could be handcuffed.
How, if at all, did the defendant respond to being struck with your baton?
He kept moving past me.
Did he get all the way past you now and he is east of you on Concord?
He did.
Right? What happened once he moved past you on Concord? Are you still watching him?
Yes.
Right? What did you see?
I heard Officer Cruz's taser go off a second time, and he continued to move east.
You said he continued to move east.
Mr.
Who was-
Carter
Mr. Carter.
continued to move east.
Do you know where Officer Cruz was in relation to yourself when you heard the second taser go off?
He was to the right of me.
All right, so you're where you are on that night. Can you show us where Officer Cruz was?
You need me to stand?
You can sit as long as you can
Okay.
do it from sitting position.
He was to my right.
Right and behind?
And behind me, yes.
Okay, and are you still on
Well,
the side?
actually, off to the side of me,
Are you still on the sidewalk?
yes.
So that would put him further on the sidewalk from the road than yourself.
Yes.
And now at this point, Concord Street is on your left-hand side.
Actually, Concord Street is behind me.
Okay, so where are you in the photograph when you're describing this?
Right along here on the sidewalk. And Officer Cruz is like right here. And Mr. Carter is right here, a few feet beyond me.
Right? What did you see Mr. Carter do? And this is following your strikes of the baton on his arm and his leg.
Yes.
What did you see?
He flinched again
Because of the taser?
because Officer Cruz had deployed his taser again.
Again, did you see the prongs actually make contact with his body?
No, I wasn't paying attention to the prongs or the wires. I was just concentrating on him.
Now that you bring it up, you referenced some wires, and I've been talking about prongs. How does a taser work? What actually happens, and how does the device operate? Not the mechanics of it
Right,
or the electricals of it, but
right.
how does electricity go from one point to another?
Well, you have to connect both of the prongs in order to get a circuit.
Right? And the prongs are attached to the end of the taser?
They're attached to the end of the wires, and the wires are attached to the inside of the cartridge.
So the cartridge is on the end of the taser,
Yes,
and then it shoots out? Is that what happens?
yes,
And then the prongs are designed to pierce the skin?
they are.
Right, and then that closes a circuit and allows electricity.
Yes,
Okay, so when you say you don't know if the prongs made contact, that's what you're referring to.
yes, sir.
All right. Did you see the wires from the second taser discharge?
I wasn't paying attention. I couldn't tell you if I saw the wires.
Okay, and Mr. Carter at that point is still in the same location when you just described. Is
Yes,
that right? All right, and you said he flinched a little bit again.
yes, sir, he did.
All right. What did you do at that point?
I was trying to close my ass up because Officer Cruz, I thought, was going to go hands-on again.
All right, were you able to close it?
No, I wasn't able to close it.
It malfunctioned, for lack of a better word?
I have no idea what happened to it, but it wouldn't close.
Were you able to see what Officer Cruz was doing while you were trying to close your baton?
No.
You were focused on what you were doing.
Yes, sir.
Right, what's the next thing you remember happening after your focus went from the baton back to the situation?
Officer Cruz is still telling Mr. Carter, put your hands behind your back, and he wouldn't do it.
Where was Mr. Carter at this point?
Right here in this corner.
So almost to the very corner of Orange and Concord,
Yes, sir.
right? So if he wouldn't get his hands behind his back, what was he doing?
He was just standing there.
Had you at any point observed the defendant's demeanor during this protracted struggle? Because you described it when you first walked up to him and said he was just sort of staring,
Right.
right? Were you able to observe his demeanor while he was struggling with yourself and Officer Cruz?
Just silent and determined.
What was the next thing that happened after Noel Carter was on the corner and refusing Officer Cruz's commands?
I was still trying to close my expandable baton, and Officer Cruz tried to go in and go hands-on again. I was trying to tell one of the security personnel to grab my asp so that I can help Cruz. And at that time, Mr. Carter and Officer Cruz were struggling here, and then they went down into the street here on Concord, partially on the sidewalk and partially onto Concord Street.
When you say struggling, what did you see?
Officer Cruz was grabbing at his arm and trying to gain control of it, and Mr. Carter was pulling away, moving towards Concord Street.
All right. Were you still stationary at that point?
Yes.
What happened next?
Well, I just dropped my asp. Mr. Carter and Officer Cruz, they fell into the street, and at that time, Mr. Carter just jumped up and started running.
Which direction did Mr. Carter run?
He crossed Concord here, got on the west sidewalk, which is right here, and ran north on Orange Avenue.
This is one, space exhibit 2. Do you see the area where he fled at that point?
Yes.
Can you show us the path of travel that Mr. Carter took?
He crossed Concord here and got on the west sidewalk. He ran northbound, and we probably ran about 75, 100 yards, and then he crossed over to the street here beyond where this car is parked.
Now, when you saw him start to run, did you give immediate chase?
Both Officer Cruz and I began chasing him, yes.
Do you know how long this struggle had been going on at that point?
I have no idea.
Did it feel like a long time?
It always feels like a long time.
All right. So who was in front of whom? In other words, were you running in front of Officer Cruz? Was he in front of you, or were you side by side as you ran down Orange Avenue?
Officer Cruz was ahead of me. Mr. Carter's here. Officer Cruz is back here. And I ran along the outside the sidewalk against traffic in this, I guess if you're facing south, it'll be the right lane right here.
Was there vehicle traffic as you were running?
It was.
Now, do you remember, did you eventually see Mr. Carter stop?
Yes.
Where did he stop?
Up in this area behind this white vehicle here, there's a area right there.
Is there a curb there?
Yes.
Right? When he stopped, what did he do?
He just sat down on the curb.
Do you know who the first person to reach him was?
I think it was me.
Right? What did you observe as you approached Mr. Carter and he's sitting on the curb?
He's sitting on the curb. He's got his arms in between his legs like this, and he's just breathing real hard, and he's just staring at us as we're crossing the street approaching him.
Did you have any weapons out at that point?
No, had no weapons out.
Were you able to see his fist?
Yes, I was watching him.
What did you see?
I saw that he was mad, and I felt like he was enraged.
Right? So were you running or walking at this point?
Walking.
Did you say anything as you approached Mr. Carter?
Officer Cruz was telling him to roll over and put his hands behind his back.
Now, at this point, is Cruz in front of you, behind you, or somewhere else?
I don't know. I think we might have been side by side. He was a little bit behind me when I approached.
Did Noel Carter react in any way to Officer Cruz's most recent command now that you've gotten down North Orange Avenue?
No.
What did you do when you got into the vicinity of Noel Carter?
When I walked up, Officer Cruz is giving him commands. He's not listening, and I kicked him on the left arm right here
Why did you kick him as he sat on the ground?
because I felt like he was still ready to fight. I mean, he had been sprayed. He had been hit with an expandable baton. He had been tased twice, and none of that had an effect on him.
In the posture that he was sitting in on the curb, are you able to effectuate an arrest with him sitting like that?
It's quite possible. I mean, it's awkward, but it's quite possible.
Right? Why was Officer Cruz telling him to get on his stomach? Hold on, let's wait for 1 second. Okay, go ahead. Why was Officer Cruz telling him to get on his stomach?
Because he could roll over and he would be in a position that he could be easily cuffed and not be able to combat us or fight us.
Is that one of the standard positions that you seek from a arrestee as a law enforcement officer?
Yes, it's one of the first things that they teach us. It's called the prone position.
And why is that one of the standard techniques or positions that's taught?
Well, it's safe for us, and also the bad guy or the suspect or the person that we're cuffing is vulnerable to a point where he can't watch what we're doing and react.
But Mr. Carter didn't assume that position at that point.
No, sir, he didn't.
So you said when you approached him, and a major observation is you kicked him one time,
I did.
all right? Did you kick him any subsequent times at that point?
No.
Who was the next person to have any physical contact with Noel Carter at that point?
Officer Cruz came around to my right.
Right? And what did he do when he went around your right side?
I think he gave him a kick as well.
Okay? To the same location or a different location on Mr. Carter's body?
I think it was a different location, maybe a little lower.
Okay? And did Mr. Carter respond to that?
No, he did not.
And I didn't ask, did he respond to your kick?
No.
And are you still giving verbal commands at this point?
Officer Cruz is telling him, roll over and put your hands behind your back.
At any point, did you see Officer Cruz move behind Mr. Carter?
Yes.
When did that happen?
After he kicked him, he moved behind Mr. Carter.
What did you see Officer Cruz do in relation to Mr. Carter as he moved behind him?
Well, we're continuing to tell him to roll over and put his hands behind his back. He did not. And Officer Cruz retrieved his expandable baton from the holster.
Right. What did Officer Cruz do next once he removed his baton?
He continued to give him verbal commands. He didn't extend the baton, but he was hitting him on the outside of his right arm here with the closed baton.
So now it sounds like you're on the left side of Mr. Carter and Officer Cruz is on the right.
Yes.
And you're both facing the street?
Yes.
Did Mr. Carter react to the strikes with the baton at all?
He did not. He continued to just sit.
Did you feel it was safe to try to go any closer to Mr. Carter at that point?
No.
Did you observe Officer Cruz try to go closer to him at that point?
I did.
What did Officer Cruz do?
Well, the strikes with the closed baton by Officer Cruz didn't have an effect. Officer Cruz reholstered his expandable baton, and then he kneeled down behind Mr. Carter and tried to grab him in the back of the arms to try and pull his arms away from his body. And Mr. Carter just kept tensing, and it wouldn't happen. So Officer Cruz got his arms underneath there, and then he kind of straddled Mr. Carter from behind to try and pull him back like this. And then Mr. Carter lunged back, and he pinned Officer Cruz between himself and the curb.
Where were you as you were observing all of this?
I was at that point standing in front of Mr. Carter.
Did you have any weapons in your hand at that point?
I did not.
What did you do when you saw Officer Cruz pinned on the sidewalk?
That's when I went down to the pavement and I started grabbing Mr. Carter's arms to try and pull him away from his body.
From in front of Mr. Carter or from behind?
From in front of him.
Right? And how did Mr. Carter respond to your attempts to grab his arms?
He pulled his arms away and then he punched me right here in the chest.
Now, with your standard summer uniform, did you wear a protective vest of any kind?
Always. I always have my body armor on.
But even despite that, you felt it?
Yes.
And by protective body armor, common term would be bulletproof vest?
Yes.
Okay. Did his strike to your chest move you back in any way, or did you just feel it?
It moved me.
Right. What did you do after that?
I disengaged. I let his arms go, and I started to get up. And at that point, I told Officer Cruz to let him go.
And did Officer Cruz let him go?
He did.
And was Officer Cruz able to free himself at that point?
Yes, he did.
Can you describe the way Officer Cruz freed himself?
He let his arms go, and he just started scooting away from him.
What did Mr. Carter do after Officer Cruz got away from him by scooting?
He's continued to just sit there.
In the original posture, or did it look any different?
I wouldn't say in the original posture, but he continued to sit there.
What did you do next?
Well, when he punched me in the chest and I started to get up and I told Officer Cruz to let him go, we've gone to another level now where he's actually punching. So I decided that I was going to tase him.
And throughout the course of your testimony, you've been describing multiple weapons, right?
Yes.
And why were you transitioning between these weapons, yourself and Officer Cruz?
Because as we respond to the resistance, and it had gotten to a point where it went from pulling arms away to punching, and I had to go to what we call a hard control.
So when you went to the hard control, you said you chose the taser?
Yes.
And describe what you did once you removed your taser from its holster.
I turned it on and I deployed the taser.
Do you know if your taser struck Mr. Carter?
Yes, it did.
Where did it strike him?
Somewhere here in the midsection.
Now, were you standing, kneeling, or sitting when you discharged your taser at Mr. Carter?
I was standing.
And was he still sitting at the time?
Yes.
Had he said anything to you during the course of this interaction?
He hadn't said anything.
Had he ever said help or stop or anything of that nature?
I don't recall him saying anything like that.
You don't recall him, or he didn't say anything?
He didn't say anything.
Okay. How did he respond to your tasing him on the curb?
He fell back on his back on the curb.
Now, you said you yourself have been tased before, is that right?
Yes.
Did his body have a physical reaction similar to yours?
Yes, it did.
So what did you observe after he fell backwards?
He fell back. He was shaking. That let me know that I had proper connection with the taser and that it was working.
And what was the point of you using the taser?
Because we had went to a hard control. Everything else had not worked. And then it got to a point where Mr. Carter started punching and I was hit.
So what did you do after you saw him fall back?
We started giving him verbal commands again to roll over and put his hands behind his back.
And did he comply with those commands at this point?
No, he did not.
What did you see Mr. Carter do now?
Well, the taser has a cycle that runs for 5 seconds where the voltage runs through your body. At the end of the 5 seconds, he started to sit up again, and then I pulled the trigger again to give him another 5-second cycle because he was not complying by rolling over and placing his hands behind his back.
So you cycled the taser for 5 seconds at the initial strike, right?
Yes.
Did you give any commands before you cycled it the second time?
Yeah, Officer Cruz was telling him to roll over and put your hands behind your back.
And then you decided to do it a second time?
Yes.
And did he respond physically to the second cycle of the taser?
Yes, he kind of hopped up on his knees and he started pulling the taser prongs and wires out.
You said he got on his knees. Is he like sitting up, but on his knees, his body erect, or was he bent over on all fours?
Well, he was up on his knees. His body was erect.
Okay. What did he do after he pulled the taser prongs out?
Well, when I saw him starting to pull the prongs and the wires out, I turned my taser off and discarded the cartridge, and I put the second taser cartridge in.
Right? And did you deploy the taser a second time?
Yes, he still wasn't listening. We were still giving him commands to roll over and put his hands behind his back, and I tased him again with the second cartridge this time.
And you use the initial 5-second cycle, is that right?
Yes, it's a
And how
5-second
did he
cycle.
react, if at all, to that second taser cartridge?
He laid back down on the sidewalk on his back.
And is he still being given commands at this point?
Yes, he is.
And did he comply at that point?
No, he did not.
So he's laying on his back, but he's refusing to roll over.
He's not. He's refusing to roll over.
All right, so what did you do next?
I gave him another cycle, a second cycle with my second taser cartridge.
And was he given any commands after the second cycle?
He sat up, and Officer Cruz told him to roll over and put your hands behind your back. And then Officer Cruz started delivering side kicks to Mr. Carter's right arm.
So after receiving the second cycle from the second taser cartridge, Noel Carter sat up on the curb.
Yes.
And at that point, Officer Cruz began to kick him.
Yes, sir.
You know how many times Officer Cruz kicked him at that point?
Oof, I can't remember. I know at least 6.
Right? And was Mr. Carter responding to the kicks?
No, he was just sitting there absorbing them, and he wasn't listening to the verbal commands.
Why did Officer Cruz stop kicking Mr. Carter?
Because that wasn't working, and then I gave Mr. Carter a third cycle with my second cartridge.
And what did Mr. Carter, or how did he react to the third cycle?
He laid back on his back onto the sidewalk.
Right? So was he motionless or still moving as he laid back?
He was motionless at this time.
Was he given any verbal commands at that point?
Roll over and place your hands behind your back.
And did he comply this time?
Yes, he did.
Did you ever cycle the taser after you saw him comply?
No, I did not.
At any point after Mr. Carter rolled over to his stomach, did you ever see Officer Cruz make contact with him in any way other than to place the handcuffs on him?
He cuffed him, and that was it. No other kicks, strikes, or anything like that.
Did you ever make contact with Mr. Carter after your third cycle of the second taser?
No, I did not.
Shortly after he was handcuffed, did the backup units that you had called arrive?
Yes. They were actually arriving as he was rolling over to be handcuffed. They were coming.
Did you ever take note of the sirens, or do you remember?
I remember them coming. I could hear them.
Officer or Mr. Mays, did you suffer any injuries as a result of your interactions with Noel Carter on June 4th of 2015?
Yeah, I received several abrasions to my right knee.
Do you know when you received those abrasions?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I was turned away. Do you know when you received those abrasions?
When I went down to the ground to try and, well, to the pavement rather, to pull his arms away while Officer Cruz was straddling him.
Was that before he struck you in the chest?
That was before he struck me in the chest.
Okay. And did you seek any medical assistance or treatment, or did you treat yourself after this incident was over?
When the backup units arrived and Mr. Carter was cuffed, I asked one of the officers if he had any gel, which is the alcohol sanitizer.
And did you apply it?
Yes, I did.
I approached the witness to what's been marked as State's Exhibit N and shown to counsel.
Yes?
Mr. Mays, I'm showing you State's Exhibit N. It's a composite of 3 photographs. Please look at all 3 photographs and let me know when you've had a chance to do so.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to start with this one on the far left. Do you recognize that photo?
Yes, I do.
And is that a photo of your injuries, or the injuries to your knee that you sustained on the night of June 4th, 2015?
It is.
And the photograph in the middle, for record purposes, is N2. Do you recognize that photo?
Yeah, that's a photo of me.
Is that a photograph of you on the night of June 4th?
It is.
And that's following your interaction with the defendant, Noel Carter.
It is.
And finally, this third photograph, which is N1, do you recognize that photo?
Yes, I do.
And what is that a photograph of?
Abrasions to my knee.
Did you take that photo?
Yes.
And how long after this incident was that photograph in N1 taken?
The next morning.
And are all of these photographs fair and accurate depictions of you on the night of the incident, following your interaction with the defendant, and then N1 the morning after?
Yes.
This time, the state seeks to admit State's Exhibit N as the next number exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection.
State's Exhibit N for identification will be received as State's number 11.
Commission to publish State's Exhibit N, 11, Your Honor. So first publishing N2. Mr. Mays, look over your shoulder for me if you don't mind. That was you on the night of the incident. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Is that your police vehicle?
No, it's not.
And did you apply the bandages to your leg?
I did.
Is that the same uniform you were wearing and the duty belt when you had your interaction with the defendant?
Yes.
In 3 of State's Exhibit 11, that's a photograph after you placed bandages over the knee, is that right?
Yes.
And finally, in 1 of State's Exhibit 11, that comes out. That's a photograph of your right knee in the morning following the incident, is that right?
Yes.
What else did you do, if anything, that night after Noel Carter was taken into custody?
I went back to my duties at venue 578.
And did you do anything to further the investigation of this incident, or just back to your regular duties?
Back to my regular duties.
Did you eventually write a report about this incident?
Yes, I wrote a supplemental statement
And when did you write that supplemental statement?
the next morning.
Prior to writing your statement, did you ever speak to Officer Cruz about what happened that night?
Officer Cruz came back to the scene, and he told me that he was going to the substation to do the charging affidavit. But as far as corroborating statements or anything like this, we didn't speak on that.
Did you ever receive an email from him with any communication about this incident prior to you writing your supplemental report?
I can't remember receiving anything from Officer Cruz.
Okay. Now, after all this incident occurred, did you become aware that there was videotape of portions of the incident?
Yes.
In fact, did you become aware that there were videotape from multiple sources of different portions of the incident?
No, just the one that was from the balcony
Okay, that's the only video that you became aware of existing.
at that time, yes.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to review that video prior to writing your supplement?
No.
Did you review any other videotape of any other portion of this incident prior to writing your supplement?
I did not.
Have a moment, Judge?
Yes.
No further questions for Mr. Mays at this time. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any questions from the defense? Mr. Jury, anyone need a recess? No? Okay.
Yes, I have a question, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Mr. Mays, is it your testimony that On June 5th, 2015, after this happened, you never received a call from Sergeant Gillespie for you to watch the video from the balcony?
I didn't see, he didn't tell me to watch the video from the balcony.
Is it your testimony to this jury that you never saw that video, which was all over the news on June 5th, showing you and Officer Cruz involved with Mr. Carter?
I'm not denying that I didn't see the video.
Okay, did you see the video on June 5th before you prepared your supplementary report?
I don't know what day that I saw the video, but I did see the video on TV.
Well, you knew that there was issues going on, that Sergeant Gillespie was called to see Chief Mina about this, correct?
I don't know about any meeting with Chief Mina.
Were you aware that you were asked to get this supplement done before the night, correct?
I wasn't asked by Sergeant Gillespie on the night of the 4th to get it done. I did it the next morning when I woke up.
I'm asking you on the day of June 5th, the next day, Friday. You were asked to get that report done by that day, correct?
Yes.
Who asked you to do that?
Sergeant Gillespie asked me if I had I needed to do a supplement.
And
But
that's
that's something that I already knew I had to do.
okay. Let's talk about your involvement from this case, okay? When you were at Club Venue 578, you were called by Officer Cruz to come out and be an area where he had Ms. Espaillo and Mr. Carter, correct?
The transmission came over the radio. Officer Cruz said that he was out with a disturbance,
You keep turning to the jury when I'm asking the questions.
but I'm going to answer them.
Okay, fair
Okay.
enough. When you got over to Mr. Carter, fair to say that you never spoke to him at all?
I never spoke to Mr. Carter.
You didn't even make eye contact with him when you were over there.
I kept an eye on Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter didn't have eye contact with me. He was standing and staring at the fence.
You agree that after Officer Cruz spoke to Mrs. Espaillo, that you two conferenced before you went over to speak to Mr. Carter?
Officer Cruz came to me and said, I need to talk to him. Let's go talk to him.
And he told him, she's got a ride home, you can leave.
Yes.
At that point, had you done any investigation whatsoever with Mr. Carter, asking him any questions at all about his name or anything to do why he was there, who he was with, anything of that nature?
I had no interaction with Mr. Carter.
Okay, so no, you didn't ask him any questions.
I didn't ask him any questions.
And Officer Cruz didn't ask him any questions either before he told him that she's got a ride home, you need to go.
I can't say that. I only just know what happened when I got there. Before Officer Cruz called for the backup, I wasn't privy to any conversation between Officer Cruz, Mr. Carter, and Ms. Espaillo.
My question is, when you were there and Officer Cruz went over, that he didn't ask, when you were there, sir, not anything before, when you were there, when Officer Cruz went over to speak to Mr. Carter, he said to him, she's got a ride home, you can leave.
Yes.
He did not at any time that you were there ask him any questions about his name or anything else involving Mr. Carter. Is that
No,
accurate?
I didn't see him talking to Mr. Carter when I got there.
Let's talk about going up to the curb. We call it the videos are from the venue and the videos from the Sentinel, okay? We'll
Okay.
just kind of define those. At some point, you got up to the curb where Mr. Carter had sat down, correct?
Yes.
And when you first got to him, the first thing you did was put a kick on him.
When I don't know, can you repeat
Yes, when
that?
you first got to him, you've seen the grainy video from the Orlando Sentinel, correct?
Yes.
In fact, let me pull it up if I could.
to sit up here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did the witness step down, Your Honor?
Yes.
May you step down and bring the point of work?
Your Honor, may I have your position?
Yes.
Before I put this in, you seen your Orlando Sentinel video?
Yes.
Did you meet with the state to look at that before coming in here to testify to that?
Not today.
How long ago before this did you meet with them? So, some months back, not to speak of, get the back.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so some months back, is the last time you met with anybody from the state?
There was someone from the state on Friday.
Who was that? Okay, so both of them, where'd you meet with them at? And did you see any videos?
No, I didn't want
Okay, did you go over your report?
I had to go to my report as a special to my deposition. Ms. Jackson and
And did you listen to anything else?
No.
Did you look at anything else? No other documents whatsoever? Okay. Read it back. See.
You come in this side, it'd be great.
Mr. Mays, I just need you to elevate your voice a little bit because you do have your back to the court reporter.
Okay, I'm
So
sorry.
that's all right. I just want to make sure she